We have a number of education bills today. So I welcome the committee members, witnesses, and the people who may be streaming it at home. Let me say off the bat that a number of our committee members have bills up in other committees. In other words, while we're hearing bills, they also have bills that are being heard, for example, in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. So there may be a few people who are on the committee, but will be joining us later. I believe that includes Senator Lamb, Senator Hester, and Senator Fry-Hester. So I think every one of the rest of the committee members. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to start with Senator Young, Senate Bill 50, Higher Education Return Peace Corps Volunteers in-state tuition. He will be followed by Glenn Bloomhurst and Jody Olson if she is in attendance. So with that, Senator Young, welcome back to EHE.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back. Since about 1961, there have been 6,500 Maryland residents that have served in the Peace Corps. In 2019, we had about 259 serving, and in 2020, about 66 additional University of Maryland students from College Park joined the Peace Corps. And we're the per capita, the 5th highest state in the country supporting the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps volunteers are known as change makers that promote world peace by working in global communities to build a capacity for addressing problems to improve lives, all the while building goodwill for our country. In March 2020, with COVID, as it spread the world, the Peace Corps called all our Peace Corps volunteers back. So when they returned home, many of them decided to work on further degrees, and were shocked to find that they were considered out-of-state residents. While most of them had grown up here, lived here their whole life, never changed their address while they were in the Peace Corps, they were charged out-of-state tuition when they came back. There's not that many people involved. On an average, we have about 100 to 10 Peace Corps volunteers a year that join, and they're there for 2 years. So at most we have about 200 plus serving at any one time. So what we're trying to do is to allow these Peace Corps volunteers to retain their in-state status when they return to Maryland. And it's very similar to the exemptions that we've provided for AmeriCorps and for the military. This bill applies to 4-year public institutions of higher education, community colleges, and for our senatorial scholarships. I really, in many ways, just view this as a technical correction. I think they should have been included all along. It's pretty tough to have people from our state volunteer to serve our country and then come home and find they're not considered residents of their state anymore. So the fiscal note on this is basically almost nothing. They found it would cause no real problems. I would like to offer his amendment today. Senator Lamb, Lee, and West offered to co-sponsor the bill. And so I ask that you vote favorably on Senate Bill 50. Again, I think it was an oversight. This bill passed the House overwhelmingly last year, but along with a lot of other things in the session we had, just never made it through our side. So I would hope that that might happen this year. I have one panelist with me, Glenn Bloomhurst from the National Peace Corps Association, and I think we have someone else that would like to speak. Thank you.
Senator, would you like to have Mr. Blumhorst and then take questions, or you want to take questions now?
Whichever way you like.
If you don't mind, then we'll go to Mr. Blumhorst from the MPCA. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Health, Education, and Environmental Affairs Committee. I very much appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of SB 50. This is in addition, of course, to our written testimony that has been submitted. I want to thank Senator Young, especially for his leadership on this important legislation, and those who've joined in co-sponsoring it. I'm glad to hear about that as well. Thank you all so much. This is, as Senator Young has stated, I believe, a corrective action, very logical and practical from our perspective for Maryland residents who have served their country in the Peace Corps abroad for a couple of years usually, and returned back to Maryland to continue to serve their nation here at home in many different ways. That's what we call the domestic dividend of the Peace Corps. Myself, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala for 3 years, from 1988 to 91. I have come from a family of service that includes a father who is a peacetime Marine Corps veteran, a brother who served as a Persian Gulf Army veteran, and an uncle who served in Vietnam. So national service for me is very important, and I chose to serve in the Peace Corps for the way that I felt that I could serve our country and our world. Have been a resident of Maryland for 14 years, so I'm not originally from Maryland. I think I join others who are now constituents here in Maryland, probably numbering in the tens of thousands of return volunteers who are now voting constituents here throughout Maryland, particularly around the DC area. National Peace Corps National Peace Corps Association represents a community of over 250,000 individuals who served in the Peace Corps since its founding in 1961. And as Senator Young mentioned, over 6,500 residents from Maryland have served in the Peace Corps since its inception as well. Volunteers do such an important role. The work that they do in building bridges of friendship and understanding as they serve abroad is brought back home, as we say. We bring home our experience and we share that experience, and we share our empathy for others and our ability to build bridges of understanding across divides, and friendship and understanding of other countries and other cultures is really part of what we call the third goal of the Peace Corps. It's very important as part of the Peace Corps experience that begins with that 27 months of service abroad, but it is a lifetime of service that continues after our return back home. So that third goal of the Peace Corps being accomplished here in the United States is that domestic dividend that we speak of, and the value of the Peace Corps that's reflected in what it brings home to local communities here in the U.S. The benefits that return Peace Corps volunteers are provided as they return back are really modest. They're quite limited in many ways. They do not compare closely to those of other forms of national service. One of our goals is to really address this challenge of having Peace Corps service addressed as a form of national service, and seeking fair and equitable treatment for those alums who've served in the Peace Corps. And this comes up in a variety of areas relating to the service benefits for state employees, seeking retirement credit, to equitable treatment in healthcare, and of course, as we speak here, in education benefits. So equity for us is really the key consideration for this bill. We're proud of the service of Peace Corps volunteers abroad and here at home. And we encourage and ask you to report out favorably on SB 50 and see it approved by the Senate. Thank you all for your service and your leadership on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Blumhorst. Ms. Olson. You need to unmute, Ms. Olson.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am a 55-year Maryland resident, a graduate of University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work, a graduate of the College of Education PhD, a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Tunisia, and the 20th Peace Corps director. I unfortunately had to be the one that asked all the volunteers to return home in March of 2020. I want to speak in favor of this bill very strongly, and I want to do it from the perspective of the universities. I was on the faculty of the School of Social Work for 8 years. before I became Peace Corps director, and I watched the value that returned Peace Corps volunteers brought to their graduate education. They offered so much in the classroom. They offered much with the faculty. In fact, faculty would tell me they are some of the strongest students they had in their master's degree program. I also watched their work as they did their field placements in the city and county, particularly Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and again, the assets that they offered because of language and cultural skills. Critically, I watched many of the returned Peace Corps volunteers who chose Maryland then stayed. They bought houses, they started families, they took professional jobs in the school system, in mental health, and stayed as strong Maryland residents once they got their degree. I have promoted returning Peace Corps volunteers to come to Maryland schools. As you can tell, I believe in Maryland higher education very strongly. And some have said, I wish I could, but it doesn't offer the in-state tuition that I need. I will go to another state where I might be able to get, or where I see I can get in-state tuition for returning Peace Corps volunteers. And I think what a loss for us by not offering that. And even though they would prefer to be here, they go to a different state. And again, to emphasize, it becomes a great advertisement for our higher education system here in Maryland to know that returning Peace Corps volunteers, what they're seeing and feeling and hearing is Maryland welcomes us. Maryland higher education welcomes us. We can be with a cohort of service contributors. And as I say, in almost all the cases, they stay and become taxpayers, productive citizens, professionals. I came as an outsider. I got my degree. I paid out-state tuition when I got my MSW right after Peace Corps 1,000 years ago. And I stayed 55 years.
Olson, you're going to have to wrap up, ma'am.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the witnesses on oral testimony today. Committee members, if you have any questions for the good senator or Mr. Blumhorst or Ms. Olson, now is the time. It's pretty straightforward bill. We appreciate it. Unfortunately, we didn't get to it last year. Questions, committee. Please use the reactions and raise a hand if you do. I don't see any questions. That being the case, I want to thank all of you. And that would conclude the hearing on SB 50. Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you, witnesses.
Thank you.
Okay, we will be going in ascending order unless conditions warrant a change or the sponsor can't be here. So we are going to, I see Senator Sidnor. We're going to Senate Bill 55, Baltimore County Education Retention of Counsel. There is no opposition signed up. Senator Sidnor will be followed by Nikita Scott and also Cheryl Pasteur. With that, Senator Sidnor, welcome to EHE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee. Senate Bill 55 is a local bill, so we have not yet had our hearing at our local delegation, but as soon as we have that hearing and get a letter of support, which I would expect, we'll make certain to get this over to the committee. What Senate Bill 55 does is it puts Baltimore County's Board of Education on similar footing as all other school boards across the state by allowing the Board of Education to retain legal counsel in legal matters affecting the board and the contract for the payment of a reasonable fee to counsel without prohibition. Currently under state law, we can't, the school board cannot do it. And in fact, it has to go to the county's attorney in order to retain counsel. I haven't been able to reconcile why Baltimore County is the only school board with this limitation, but with Senate Bill 55, I'm hoping to change that. The witnesses that you'll be hearing from While I do not believe they're speaking in their official capacities, they have served on our school board and can kind of speak to the need of this particular bill. And with that, I'm asking that this committee move favorable on Senate Bill 55. Thank you.
Senator, should I go ahead with your two and then take questions, or do you want them now?
Sure, I can take questions now.
Do you have a preference?
No preference.
Okay, let's, if you don't mind, let's go to Scott, please.
Sure.
Please unmute Ms. Scott and welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. My name is Makita Scott, and as some of you may know, I sit on the Baltimore County Board of Education. However, today I am here speaking as a private citizen and not on behalf of the Baltimore County Board of Education for Senator Sidnor's bill, Senate Bill 55, excuse me. Again, I'm speaking as an individual and not on behalf of anyone or any organization. I feel that it is important to pass Senator Sidnor's bill, Senate Bill 55, as it will give the Baltimore County Board of Education the ability to select and retain its own counsel. This would also put the Baltimore County School Board on parity with other county school boards across Maryland. As of now, the Baltimore County School Board is the only county school board, to my knowledge, that is not authorized to select its own counsel. As you know, most boards of education operate in a quasi-judicial role, and since every board has a quasi-judicial role, having and being able to choose counsel is very important. So I'd like to thank Senator Sidnor for introducing Senate Bill 55, and thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ms. Pasteur.
Good afternoon, Senator Penske and committee members. I am Cheryl Pasteur. Today, I speak in favor of Senate Bill 55. I am the current Baltimore County Board Vice Chair, but I speak today as an individual. The board has not yet discussed this bill as a whole. This is an easy bill to support. It allows for the payment of a reasonable fee to pay counsel, money coming from the board's annual budget. The first tenet of the Baltimore County legislative priority states that we believe in the autonomy of local school boards because we understand that each system is diverse in population and needs, and the Baltimore County School Board is certainly no exception. Recall that initially, several years ago, that there were 2 assistant county attorneys. Then, because of a county budget cut, only 1 assistant attorney, whose role was to serve as counsel for the Baltimore County School Board on behalf of the county's attorney. For several years now, there has been no assistant county attorney, thus opening the door for several years now for a part-time counsel who is hired with the approval of the county attorney. Again, this offered Baltimore County the distinction, if you will, as being the only system in Maryland needing sanction from the county attorney to hire legal counsel. This bill reflects our needs for legal counsel chosen by the board on a consulting basis, as it currently does, with the expectation that the board will act in a fiscally responsible manner, having protocols and policies to that end. This bill demonstrates the belief that this school board is perfectly capable of hiring, working with counsel, and assessing its needs germane to the relationship with that counsel. I thank you for this opportunity to speak, and Senator Sidnor, again, thank you.
Thank you. I see Senator Patterson. We'll open up for questions from the committee for good Senator Sidnor, Ms. Pastor, or Ms. Scott. I see Senator Patterson. You need to unmute, Senator Patterson.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Signor, I guess you never had a council for. I guess I'm trying to figure out is this a council for the school board? Is this a council for the county council? Help me out a little bit. I mean, what's the reporting transparency?
Sure. So the school board has its own legal counsel. So what this bill gives the school board the ability to do is to hire outside counsel. Currently, under the current statutory framework, if the school board needs outside counsel, they have to go and get permission from the Baltimore County government's county attorney. And as Pastor noted, they have not had an assistant county attorney in some time, and so this just kind of helps to streamline the process of allowing that school system's attorney to go ahead and hire outside counsel rather than going and asking permission from another attorney to hire an attorney.
So I take it the school board don't have a budget per se?
They do have a budget for legal counsel. Yes, they do.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Other questions, committee members? Seeing none, it's a local bill. We'll hold it in abeyance. And as soon as we get a letter, hopefully we can move on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Senator Sidnor. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 55. Go to Senate Bill 124. We welcome in Senator Heddleman, a grant program to reduce and compost school waste. Let me mention that there is no opposition, either oral or written. We will hear from the good senator first, followed by Erica Weiss, Emily Ranson, Brenda Platt, Sarah Mack, Angelina Wu, Advika Agarwal, Joseph Richardson, and finally John Williams. And I'm not, Sharon Devlin is down for no testifying. So if you're here, we'll allow you, and we don't know if that was confusion or you just wanted to do written. So with that, welcome Senator Heddleman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Members of EHE, and I'm happy to be here with you today and happy to present my first bill of the year, Senate Bill 124. We have a national goal to reduce food waste, and we're supposed to try to reduce it by 50% by the year 2030. And why do we want to do that? We want to do it for two reasons. One is because we want to reduce food waste. It harms our environment because it goes mostly into landfills or incinerators, and it creates greenhouse gases there, which is exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing and what your committee spends so much time doing in an attempt to avert climate change and to improve our environment. Second, we should also be concerned about how we're using food in light of the fact that nearly 1 out of 7 children in Maryland suffers from hunger. And so many of our students are dependent on school-based meals in order to meet their nutritional needs on a daily basis. Food waste is a persistent problem, with over 25% of the overall food supply at the retail and consumer level going uneaten and wasted. And what we want to focus on through this bill is trying to prevent that waste by ensuring that it's not used if it's not needed up front and getting it to the people who do need it, but also reducing the waste that comes from it. In Maryland, it's estimated that just under 2 million tons of compostable materials and over 900,000 tons of food waste are generated each year. And even though that is a major component of our overall waste, we just recycle a little over 15% of that in 2019. And so the remainder ends up in landfills or an incinerator, and it is harmful. So this bill addresses dual problems. It addresses hunger and the environment. And by being good stewards with our food, we can focus our efforts on preventing food waste and redirecting it to people who need it away from the landfills. And how does this bill do this? Well, it creates a grant program within MSDE, and the grant program is $500,000. And what it would do, it would permit the Maryland Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education the ability to allocate those funds in a multifaceted way. And school systems, as well as individual schools, will be allowed to apply to this grant fund under a set of criteria that are outlined in the bill. But mostly we're looking to encourage student involvement in developing programs to help their schools compost and reduce food waste. And you may have seen a Maryland Matters article actually highlighted a wonderful student in Prince George's County earlier this week who literally took up this issue himself and really devoted himself to it and has gotten his school really involved. And that's happening. I know it's happening in Baltimore County. It's probably happening in each of your counties as well. And this bill would provide some of the resources to help and encourage our students. Senate Bill 124 isn't just an environmental bill. It is, as I said, a bill to address hunger as well. So without further ado, I would love to introduce, have my panelists go, and thank you very much for your time.
Senator Hedelman, would you like questions now, or would you like your panelists to go and then take questions collectively?
Collectively probably is more efficient.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, your personal panel includes whom?
Joe Richardson, Adifa Argawal, and Angelina, sorry.
I'm sorry, hold on. Advika Agarwal, who are the other two? Joe Richardson and who?
Angelina.
Okay.
Our student.
Okay. We'll hear. Let's go with the sponsors panel, and then we'll come back to the other people. Angelina, Advika, and Joseph, you'll be up, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you.
Please. Well, in whatever order. If Miss Richardson, if you want to go first, Miss Zhu, whatever. Let somebody begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and committee members. I'm here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 124, sponsored by Senator Hedelman. My name is Angelina Shi, and I'm a sophomore at Richard Montgomery High School in Montgomery County. With my partner, Advika, I'm a co-founder of the youth-led environmental organization named Compostology. Not only do we advocate for schools' food waste to be diverted from the trash to composting facilities, but we focus on food recovery as a whole. Ever since I was a first grader at Clarksburg Elementary School, I've been shocked by the massive mountains of food waste that was produced each lunch in the cafeteria. My friends at the table would leave their banana peels and the ends of bread pieces into big black garbage bins at the end of lunch because that was all we had. What was confusing for me was that I had friends that were farm students and relied on school-based meals. However, with every unopened carrot packet or chip bag that went into the garbage bin, I couldn't understand why our schools did not have a system that would assist low-income students. From our experiences starting food recovery programs at 4 elementary and middle schools, we have found that students are looking for hands-on opportunities to make a change in this world. Our school system has repeatedly told its students over the years that they are going to be the generation that will change the world. But our students are currently relegated to only hearing of problems such as climate change and food insecurity in the classroom. Senate Bill 124 will increase such equity by giving the grants for food waste recovery programs to low-income schools, as well as other schools that would have never had access otherwise. It gives students not only a voice in their system, but the power to commit to daily habits that build up to something greater than themselves, something that will improve the lives of their classmates around them and the world as a whole. When we started a food recovery program at Clarksburg Elementary School, the most impactful part of it was seeing each student feel proud for helping their planet. And for all these reasons and many more, please support Senate Bill 124 and support a transition towards food recovery in Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Advika Agarwal or Joe Richardson?
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and committee members. My name is Advika Agarwal. I live in Clarksburg, Maryland, and I'm a sophomore at Richard Montgomery High School. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 124 today on behalf of the student-led organization Compostology, which is part of the Maryland Coalition to Reimagine Waste. In 2018, in 7th grade, my partner Angelina and I began our first program at Clarksburg Elementary School. The students would throw their leftover food in separate bins, which were then hauled to a compost facility. The program helped recertify them as a Maryland Green School. It got students excited about real ways to act on issues that they'd learned about in science classes, and it created volunteering opportunities for older students. I want to bring up a few numbers that highlight the impact that these programs can have. Each month at this one program of 500 students, we diverted 880 pounds of food waste. Scale this up to all Maryland public schools, and we estimate at minimum 11.35 million pounds of food waste in one 9-month school year. For context, that's more than 1.1 million trash bags of waste. This equals over 14,000 tons of CO2 equivalent every year from public school food waste alone. That's the same as 15.7 million pounds of coal burned. So as you can see, the scope of impact for this bill is shocking. The program itself that we're trying to implement is simple, and it only costs $2,000 each year without special contracts. But the launch process requires time that realistically too few can invest in order for us to reach this large-scale impact. We owe much of our success to the time that Mr. Meyer and Ms. Zarati's MCPS teams have given us. And the reality is that we're working in Maryland's richest county. So many counties don't have the sustainability staff or the school staff that we need to start pilots, let alone consider systematic integration. Based on our experiences starting from scratch, we know that this proposed grant program will provide the support needed for teachers, principals, and anyone to divert school waste and teach long-lasting habits. The students of Maryland urge you to vote favorably on Senate Bill 124. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Agarwal. Mr. Richardson.
I am Joe Richardson, Chairman Pinsky, Senator Heddleman, and members of the committee. I'm honored to have the opportunity to testify in behalf of SB 124. I've been working on compost and waste diversion programs in schools since December of 2018, starting at Urbana High School. Prior to the pandemic, Lunch Out of Landfills was working in 14 public schools and 4 public schools in Montgomery County. We were diverting between 79 and 87% of overall waste. We taught students how to decontaminate the recycle stream, and we provided bins for liquids and for organics, in addition to the provided compost and recycling bins. With this data, FCPS had agreed to pay for compost and waste diversion and programs in 23 schools this year, but the COVID concerns and staffing issues limit us to just 5. Administration reticence is understandable, but students in these schools, grade 2 through 5, are anxious to resume the programs. Working with great students like Angelina and Advika, who you just heard from, and the Committee to Reimagine Waste, a bunch of students from BCC who secured a WWF grant of $48,000. We started food recovery programs in 5 schools in Frederick County, and we'll have almost 10 starting by February in Montgomery County. I want to share data from 2 schools. At Middletown Elementary School, prior to December 6th, all waste was put in the trash. There was no recycling bins. They were filling 11 trash cans in a day. After December 6th, we began to divert waste. Out of 1,500 pounds of waste, we reduced that to 235. 158 pounds was recycled, 728 pounds of that was compost, and 383 pounds was liquids. At Middletown, at Green Valley Elementary School, the program was the only school that started at the very beginning of the year. And they produced, since the beginning of the year, 14,744 pounds of waste. We reduced that to 2,495, about an 83% reduction. 12,319 pounds of waste has been diverted. In addition to that, we initiated food recovery programs at both schools with stunning success. At Green Valley, we have recovered, let's see my data. We've recovered over 770 pounds of organic material. There were 777 fresh fruit and vegetables, 1,367 milks and juice, and 603 items of prepackaged food. All that has been taken to the Organic Food Bank. This is systematic of every school in the state, if we can reduce that much food. There's going to be a need to coordinate with schools to make sure that food is recovered every day. It has to leave the cafeterias and be taken to a food bank. What we've learned is that compost programs require supervision and volunteers from the community at the start. You can't simply place a green bin in the cafeteria and not expect contamination. Staff leader and trained green team is essential for program success. Students, even kindergartners, quickly adapted to the new program. Within a week, students are able to function with minimal contamination, but need regular monitoring. Students are ready to engage green teams and they're growing exponentially. Empowering students and witnessing the passion and resilience they possess is incredibly gratifying, as you've just seen. This grant will fund between 175 and 200 schools and will engage over 100,000 students by next fall. We will prove that reducing cafeteria waste by 85% will be cost neutral and be sustainable, and we need to increase compost capacity and food recovery that will require coordination from school administration and citizens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Okay, let's open up to the committee for questions of the bill sponsor, Senator Hedelman, as well as Ms. Ju and Ms. Agarwal and Mr. Richardson. Questions? Senator Croza, followed by Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Hedelman, for this bill. I was interested, I've been working on with our local restaurants in Ocean City on a voluntary composting program. And so I wanted to know, Senator, and maybe some of the witnesses touched on this, are there currently voluntary programs in the schools right now that are underway, and now we're looking to put a formal grant program in place to give these local school jurisdictions the option to participate? Just wanted to better understand what was already occurring on a voluntary basis statewide in our public schools, and the purpose of this legislation, I guess, to formalize and have a program with funding.
So as you heard from the two students and Mr. Richardson, there are programs. It's ad hoc in a lot of places and across the state. So there might be a teacher, a science teacher, or there might be a couple of students who get together and initiate the efforts that the students today discussed. So this is not mandatory, but it is bringing some state resources to bear and encouraging both food recovery and composting, addressing food waste that is happening in schools across our state. And this is bringing some state resources to encourage the wonderful initiatives that each of these students that you heard today, and that, hundreds of others throughout the state are taking on themselves, really. And this is just putting in place a framework to be able to give them some state resources to encourage this real positive behavior and action they're taking. So I hope that addresses that your question.
It does, and
Thank
maybe MABE has a better just a list of maybe who's participating statewide now on a voluntary basis.
Mr. Williams will be appearing momentarily. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. In my district, there's a farm that has an anaerobic digester, and there are some volunteers that go, I believe, weekly or twice a week to Rising Sun High School, Calvert Elementary, and collect the food waste and take it to that anaerobic digester on the farm, what mixes in with the other stuff. Ultimately, they produce power that goes back on the grid, and also could produce biogas. So my question is, would those anaerobic digester facility like that would be included in with this, correct, as a place to take those products?
So absolutely. I mean, that they are doing composting, they're taking the material and they're recycling it. If this is, the stipulations that the grant program, the conditions are outlined in the bill, but really it's focused on student-led efforts. And there are a bunch of parameters that the Maryland Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education would use to assess whether a program or project was eligible for the grant funding. And certainly that seems, just from the little bit you told me, that it would be able to, certainly be considered under the parameters of the bill.
Terrific. Thank you.
And last question is coming from me. Senator Hedelman, I looked in the bill and it looks like there are 11 ways that money can be spent. And, you know, I hate to be the conservative of the bunch here, but I like to look at return on investment. And I wonder whether some of these 11, we get a better return than others. And it's a pretty long list. And, you know, school X might spend it on 2 or 3 of these, and school Y might spend it on 2 or 3 others. And I'm just wondering whether, while I believe in flexibility, whether there's could be any consideration, and I don't need it today, of maybe trimming the list a little bit to ensure that the 11 strategies, of the 11 strategies, we try to put more emphasis and focus on those that get a better return on the investment.
Sure, I'm definitely open to that. And I didn't read that as a checklist that they each have to have, you know, all of the 11.
No. I wasn't implying they had to do all 11. I guess my point is, some of these, if a school puts in a grant, 2 or 3 of these might really get a major return on investment.
Sure.
And selecting 2 or 3 others might not get quite as much. So I'm just throwing out to you, before we take it up, maybe re-looking at it, maybe narrowing the list a little bit. Again, leaving flexibility. Different schools want to do different approaches, but you know, we want to get the best results possible in terms of recycling and increasing compost. That's all.
Sure, happy to have that discussion about what you think is most impactful, but definitely.
Senator Pinsky, can I respond real quickly to that?
Briefly, sure.
Mayo will provide uniformity. And I think what we want to try to do is we want to consolidate student efforts in every county and get this launched in a number of different schools, following a series of procedures that can be replicated. This will be proved to be cost neutral. We may need $500,000 now, but we shouldn't need that in the future because of the money that we save. So having procedures and uniformity is going to be really helpful here, and making sure that the program has consistent success.
Right. And look, I hope there is an assessment, evaluation of who gets what kind of return based on the strategies and how they spend their money. Absolutely. We want to encourage best practices 2 years, 4 years, 5 years down the pike. I would also say you don't want to give away the money quite yet, even though I agree with you, it'll probably save money. You don't want to tell budget and tax. You only want it for a little while. But again, my only point was it's a fairly extensive list, so it's just something to think about. Okay, let's go. Thank you for that panel. Let's go to Erica Weiss, excuse me, followed by Emily Ransom, followed by Brenda Platt. Ms. Weiss.
Hello, thank you for having me speak. Good afternoon, everyone, members of the committee and Chair Pinsky. I'm so thrilled that you're talking about this bill, and I'm so inspired by these students, and thank you, Senator Hedelman, for bringing it up. As a public health professional and a representative of the board of the Maryland Public Health Association, it's rare that I can talk about a solution that is so simple, effective, smart, and important for our future, but Bill 125 is that. This bill helps our children rewrite the story of the food on their trays. It's part of the bigger story of the whole sustainable food cycle. Students now instinctively toss their food scraps and uneaten food in the trash when they're done, but that can change as they understand the value of these scraps for their future. Those sandwich parts and rinds are filled with nutrition for soil and for the future of plants and foods that grow from that. It's very inefficient, and many think unethical, that we're burning food now. You wouldn't throw a banana peel in your fireplace, right? So with the high mercury and nitrogen oxide and carbon dioxide and incinerators release and particulate matter, it's dangerous for human health. And that's, landfills are even worse. And even with technology to limit that, the ash waste from has to still be landfilled and leaches into our waterways. So several simple waste sorts that these students have done have found that 85 to 90% potentially of the cafeteria food waste can be diverted away from incinerators. This is a huge accomplishment. On top of that, it's tragic, as Senator Hedelman mentioned, that uneaten bananas and unused milks and things are thrown into the trash at school. especially when we acknowledge the hunger and food insecurity that many of our fellow community members have felt throughout this pandemic. Composting covers several public health priorities. It helps prevent toxic emissions from an inefficient burning or landfilling of food. It supports food recovery and food growth. It helps alleviate anxiety that students express as they feel helpless against climate change, because this is a feasible and practical solution that they can lead us in. This bill just makes sense, and we need to rewrite the story of how we all manage food waste. So thank you for bringing this up. The Maryland Public Health Association certainly supports Bill 124. We hope you do too.
And thank you, Ms. Weiss. Ms. Ransom.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action here in support of Senate Bill 124, which would help schools and kids start these great programs in their own schools. Many of these efforts so far have been supported by PTAs or Rotary clubs, and with a lot of effort from kids to go get external grants. So having a program like this within the school system would be an effective way at enabling kids from a wide variety of schools, especially those that don't have the resources that some of the other schools have, implement these programs at their own schools. So we are here in enthusiastic support, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ransom. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ms. Platt.
Yes, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 124. My name is Brenda Platt, and I direct the Composting for Community initiative at the national nonprofit, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm also here today representing the Maryland DC Compost Council, which supports this bill. And I'll just say briefly that we've made some great progress in Maryland in recognizing the importance of composting to the state's soils, businesses, climate, and of course, reducing trash. We now have a clear regulatory roadmap for building new sites, including for farmers. We have new legislation from last session that requires large food waste generators to do something with their wasted food if capacity exists. However, what is really sorely lacking is still incentives and funding mechanisms to spur and build new capacity, new programs, including education programs. As Senator Hedelman already, indicated, we generate here more than 900,000 tons of food waste, and very little is recycled. But the good news is with investment, it can grow. And one beauty of composting is that it can be small scale and farm scale and large scale and everything in between, from a worm bin in a classroom to on-site composting in schools to collection systems for schools. But I will want to emphasize that to capitalize on this moment, we really need to teach and empower Maryland's next generation, its youth, to reduce wasted food and feed the soil. And I believe schools are vital to teaching and demonstrating that. And this grant program will have, I think, tangible, immediate, and far-reaching impact. I would actually encourage you not to eliminate any of the strategies that are listed. I've been tracking a lot of school composting programs around the country. I mean, one school may want a refrigerator to rescue food. Another one may want to test replacing single-use, trays or cutlery with durables. Others may want to integrate it into curriculum to measure food waste and have hands-on learning activities. So I think one of the benefits and strengths of this program is that it will fund so many, a diversity of programs, and we'll get so much data from so many of these programs. So I would keep all those in. The other thing I'll just add, which is worth noting, is that composting can be integrated into outdoor education. And we now know how important that is to student physical and mental health, and perhaps more critical than ever, given the COVID pandemic is morphing into an endemic. So thank you for this opportunity, and I urge you to pass this bill.
Thank you. Ms. Mack. Then we'll go to see if there are any questions for the last four speakers. Ms. Mack.
Thank you, and thank you to all for the opportunity to speak in favor of SB 124. I'm speaking today on behalf of my coworkers at Compost Crew, where I'm at the helm of the marketing efforts. In 2021, Compost Crew diverted over 7 million pounds of food and organic waste from landfills, destined to become nutrient-rich soil amendment. We aren't new to composting and its benefits. As we all know, composting is a straightforward way to reduce your carbon footprint, fight climate change through limiting methane emissions, and contribute to soil revitalization efforts in your community. For these reasons, composting is a tangible way people all over Maryland can make a difference. It demonstrates the importance of zero waste and climate change mitigation principles in a very real way. Because of this, kickstarting composting as the norm for young people through providing opportunities for organics recycling in schools is crucial as we work to change the way our community and nation view consumption and waste on a generational level. It has been especially exciting for me to work alongside several schools in Maryland and Prince George counties and elsewhere in the region to help them start composting programs for their students and staff. As Compost Crew's marketing manager, I've loved connecting with the individuals most excited about initiating composting in these schools as we work to compile resources for other schools interested in starting similar programs. Even though the excitement has been palpable across the board, students have been the most frequently leading the charge to promote composting at their schools. Although it's inspiring to see young people taking such an active role in their communities through environmental action, this type of work should not be the responsibility of this younger generation alone. We have the resources, the opportunity, and the responsibility to make it easier for schools across Maryland to start composting through the passage of SB 124. Providing a funding opportunity for composting in schools is an important contribution to empowering students to reduce their waste and care for our planet. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. If committee members have any questions for Ms. Mack, Ms. Platt, Ms. Ranson, or Ms. Weiss, I will entertain those. As I said, there is no opposition to the bill. There may be some written testimony with amendments, but otherwise there's no opposition. Oh, I'm sorry. Seeing no questions for that group, let's go back. Mr. Willems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. To be clear, MABE is in strong support of this legislation. The amendment identified in MABE's testimony is one that is technical in nature. I think it's important to point out, based on some of the testimony offered already, however, that there is a distinction between teams of students and staff initiating programs, voluntary programs, as Senator Croza described them. And anecdotally, we know of many of those in urban and rural school systems across the state that have been very successful. But in establishing a state grant program, we would encourage an amendment to clarify that it would be the school system applying for that grant. So there is a coherent, integrated effort to inform our school maintenance staff, for instance, all of our principals, and other key staffers of the adoption of this program and the funding through grants. Would in no way impede the organic, I guess, pun intended, approach that we've taken so far to these initiatives. And I don't have data and have never seen a report either on the implementation of the food recovery legislation passed in 2016 or of these more grassroots school-based composting initiatives. So again, I'm a little more aware of some of the school system adopted initiatives for pilots of school waste composting, such as in Charles County. And but we strongly support the legislation and this initiative going forward. There is federal support from both the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. EPA for greater attention to reducing school food waste and in the area of food recovery. So very important initiative, and we would greatly appreciate and benefit from the state support provided through this grant program, and urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 124. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willems. Seeing no further witnesses, and as I said, no opposition, that brings to a close the hearing on Senator Heddleman's Bill 124. We thank the senator. We thank our witnesses for taking time to join us today. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to SB 157. That's Senator Carter. Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners, student members, and task force to study compensation. Again, just for your knowledge, there is no one signed up in opposition. There may be one or two people signed up with amendments. There is no opposition. We will start with Senator Carter, and she will be followed by Corey Gaber and Ms. Kalia Harris, if she's with us, followed by Ashley Esposito. So with that, welcome to the committee, Senator Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Environmental Health and Education Committee. It's nice to see you. You're my first bill of the session So hopefully the first one will be a charm. You know, I bring this bill to you today, which is really the product of a coalition of stakeholders that have the best interest of our Baltimore City school children at heart. And you will hear the testimony of 3 of the members of that coalition today. I just am here to present the bill. Many of you know that have been around for a while are aware that Baltimore City public school system there have been efforts for decades since the 1990s to make it an elected school board or partially elected school board. And some years ago, finally, after many years of effort, partially elected school board was achieved. This bill is a very small effort to upgrade and improve on even the legislation that was created that made for a partially elected school board. This committee and this body was very vigilant and did a lot of heavy lifting recently on Blueprint for Maryland's Future and other initiatives to improve outcomes for our students. This we see as one more step to improve outcomes for Baltimore City school children. It's an effort to further democratize our school board. And so with that, it's a straightforward bill, and it does 2 things. 1, it increases the number of student representatives on the board from 1 to 2, so just 1 additional student member. And it creates a task force to study how to best compensate members so that the board can better reflect the demographics of the city. Unlike other school boards across the state that have more than 1 student representative, the Baltimore City's public school students are told implicitly through policy that they are less trusted to make decisions on a range of educational issues that directly affect them. This bill would place a 2nd student member on the board, thus giving the voice of students greater weight in matters involving their education. It would also facilitate peer-to-peer support and skills development in navigating board membership. The second thing that the bill does is the issue of member compensation. Of the 24 jurisdictions across the state, Baltimore City is only one of 2 jurisdictions that offers no compensation to its school board members. Our members dedicate on average more than 20 hours a week on board matters. Their time commitments include meeting preparation, hosting community town halls and school-based events, and attending bi-weekly school board meetings that generally last from between 3 to 7 hours. Our school board members are working the equivalent of permanent part-time jobs. This uncompensated time commitment makes it impractical for individuals that need to work multiple jobs to serve on this board. This limits the pool of persons to only those with substantial income or those that don't need to earn any income at all. Without compensation, it's nearly impossible for most residents in Baltimore to serve on the school board. Under the current scheme, the voices and perspectives of only the wealthy will continue to supersede others, and there will remain an unlevel playing field. Currently, the Maryland State Department of Education regulations allow for compensating school board members. Adding a line item for board compensation would amount to 0.1% of the district's budget, or potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars less in income for school police force. We must take steps to ensure that any eligible Baltimore City resident is able to serve on the school board without their income serving as a barrier. And so for these reasons, I'd urge a favorable report, and following my testimony, you will hear from Corey Gaber, Dr. Kalila Harris, and Ashley Esposito, again, members of a coalition that have worked very thoughtfully on this legislation for a couple of years now, trying to make sure that they've hashed out the best product. And so this isn't willy-nilly or random or haphazard. A great deal of thought and effort has come to this proposal before you today. And with that, I will end my testimony and work with them to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Obviously, this will have to go through your delegation, and we'll hold it pending a letter from them. Okay, let's go to Mr. Gaber.
Thank you, Senator Carter, and good afternoon, members of the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. My name is Corey Gaber, and I'm a District 40 resident and a vice president on the Baltimore Teachers Union Executive Board. I support SB 157 to increase the amount of student members of the City Schools Board of Commissioners from 1 to 2, to give those students members full voting rights and the ability to participate in closed or executive sessions, to alter the process by which those students are chosen to be more democratic, and to establish a commission to research and make recommendations on board member compensation. It's time we live up to our lofty rhetoric about how amazing our young people are by actually empowering them with the same rights as every other board member. I've personally spoken with the past 3 student commissioners, Kyrie Sykes, Joshua Lynn, Ashley Pena, and all of them felt like second-class citizens and at worst, tokens in service of other adults' agendas. One of the things that they and former student commissioner in Anne Arundel County's board, Drake Smith, mentioned was the need to have a peer they could confide in, someone also on the board who saw things from their vantage point. We know that when you are in a space as the only person with a particular identity, it's challenging to have a fully expressed voice. Adding a second seat can both help to ensure students are prepared to vote with guidance from a fellow student member and leave space for students who are in non-traditional situations, such as students experiencing homelessness, students who are immigrants or ESL, students with disabilities, to represent their peers as well. If we truly value our youth, then it's time we empower them to be full participants on the board. Serving on the school board is the equivalent of taking an unpaid part-time job right now. Regular meetings, often during the working day, are challenging for many workers or individuals with young children. The volunteer-like nature of being an uncompensated school board member limits the candidate pool to those with the unfair advantage of flexible schedules and more resources. People should be fairly compensated for their time, and the opportunity to serve should be accessible to all people, especially parents or guardians of city school students. This bill establishes a task force to study what compensation makes the most sense and to submit recommendations. Now, one amendment that this bill could use that won't prove that everybody's in agreement on is removing the delegate convention intermediary step of the student member of the board election process. This was modeled off of how a different county does it in Maryland, and asking schools to hold separate elections just to appoint delegates to a convention to narrow the field of candidates would be logistically complex and potentially create an undue burden on staff whose time is already stretched to the breaking point. By moving straight to the general vote for all eligible candidates, we would not only remove this burden, but end up with a more direct democratic process that still offers a valuable opportunity for real-life civics education and engagement. Finally, I'd like to emphasize, as a member of the Votes Coalition, this bill is already a significant compromise. We met with members of the school board and the mayor's office over the summer in good faith discussions after pulling last session's bill that would have more dramatically restructured the board. Their concerns and ideas were incorporated into this legislation to ensure that we can move towards a more democratic, transparent, youth-centric, and effective board. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 157. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaber. Dr. Harris, please.
Thank you, Senator Pinsky. Thank you, Senator Carter, and the members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I am the Managing Director for K-12 Education Policy at the Center for American Progress. I'm also a non-resident senior fellow with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. And I first served in government as the Deputy Director for the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. I ran a school for 10 years in Baltimore City. I'm a recovering lawyer. So I think I bring a ton of experience to this discussion, and the most critical experience I have is a mother of 3 daughters who were born and raised here in Baltimore City. I won't take up too much time here, but I do want to flag 3 questions that are critical with Senate Bill 157. And those 3 are whether or not you believe Baltimoreans have a right to govern themselves, whether or not we're communicating to our students that their voices both don't matter and that they're ill-equipped to navigate any conflicts of interest in ways that adults are asked to manage conflicts of interest. And the third is whether or not this body, in support of the Baltimore delegation, is willing to reduce barriers for Baltimore residents to be able to serve on the Board of School Commissioners. Access to voting and the ability to serve the public without unnecessary barriers are core tenets of a strong democracy. And while the average state income of an individual in Maryland is $40,431 and $84,805 for a household, the average for Baltimore City residents is $29,000 for an individual and $50,000 for a household, according to the US Census Bureau. And despite these differences, there's no monetary support for Baltimore City's commissioners, even though that is not the case in 2021 of the 23 boards of education here in the state of Maryland. So I would like to ask that there's a favorable vote for Senate Bill 157 to move forward out of your committee and to the full Senate, so that we can support our residents in having a voice in their school system. There is a historic. Thank you. I'll stop.
Okay, Senator Riley, is it okay if we have one more panel member then take?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, let's go to Ashley Esposito, please. Then we'll take questions for the last panel.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everybody on the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. My name is Ashley Esposito. I'm a resident of Baltimore City, and I live in the 40th District, and I fully support SB 157. As stated, currently the Baltimore City School Board of Commissioners the student commissioner does not have voting rights. Their voice and opinion should carry the same weight as any other commissioner. They are the subject matter experts of our education system and can articulate how decisions could affect the student population real time. I strongly believe having a student voting member at the table where education decisions are made is incredibly valuable to the school board. Institutions like University of Maryland and Maryland Higher Education Commission have student members with voting rights, as well as other county boards. Baltimore City Public Schools should be no different. The student commissioner having voting rights ensures that they are able to be a part of the conversations leading up to a vote. A voice without being able to exercise a vote means that it's just an opinion. Having an additional student member means that they have someone that they can discuss policy, someone that also has the same student perspective. This bill ensures that they have full autonomy to represent the student body at large. I have watched board meetings and I've seen the student member take their responsibility very seriously. I fully trust them, trust that they can take in the same information as every other commissioner and exercise their vote. We are constantly asking youth to be more involved, and giving the student commissioner the ability to vote is a pathway to quality engagement. It will make it clear that the board values their opinion as more than just a fly on the wall, and they are an active participant in the decision-making process. This bill solidifies that we truly respect their time, their voice as a student member, and we trust them to make important decisions. They are already putting their time and energy into civic engagement, and we can empower them with voting rights. It is vital that we allow them to go on the historical record with their opinion. Just as students in these hearings who have given testimony to change legislation, and even student-led groups who are writing their own legislation, school boards should be no different. I have no doubt that the student commissioner on Baltimore City's public school board will have a similar impact because they see things that adults in the room can't see. While we're fighting for voting rights in this country, we can't overlook the voting rights of our youth, especially when it comes to education. For these reasons, as someone who was a former student who thoughtfully and impactfully exercised my ability to vote on boards, I respectfully urge the committee to offer a favorable report for SB 157. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esposito. Perfect on the time. Okay, let's open up the questions for the bill sponsor, as well as panelists Gaber, Harris, and Esposito. We'll start with Senator Riley, followed by Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Mrs. Esposito, and it's a general question for all three of the people testifying. In Anne Arundel County, we had this issue come before us 20-some years ago when ours was the first student with voting rights in the United States. I believe there's 1,400 plus Board of Educations in the United States, but very, very few have extended the voting rights. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. and it's a general question. Ms. Esposito, have you talked about a 16 or 17-year-old student voting on discipline of principals, vice principals, and teachers, number one, and number two, voting on many million-dollar budgets, both operating and capital, when many of them have no fiscal experience of dealing with money very often? Again, I'll be very respectful of the Baltimore City delegation's decision, but I wonder if those issues, Ms. Esposito, has been discussed by your committee.
Yes, it has. And I believe, like, from our perspective, definitely there are people who have served on school boards across the country who don't have that experience, but they are still able to take in the same information and make those decisions, ask the right questions. And like, you don't have to have like an operating budget of $1 billion or have experience with that specifically to be able to guide decision-making processes.
May I weigh in as well?
Vice Chair Kagan, no, we're gonna have one person answer if we can. We have more bills to hear. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and I don't know if this is answerable. So first off, as a student, I actually voted for the very first SMOB, student member on the Board of Education, when I was in high school and involved in student government and stuff. I guess that might not surprise some. I was a student government nerd back in the day. But I voted on the very first SMOB, who's still very actively engaged in our community and our county and all that. And I'm a big supporter, and I trust students, and I believe that their voices are needed. I'm wondering about the concept of paying them. So currently, our SMOB candidates, student member on the Board of Education, our candidates put their passion and their time and their devotion and their thoughtfulness into service. And I totally get that that means that they have a harder time having a part-time job or whatever. I'm wondering, I just learned, and I just texted, in Montgomery County, we offer scholarship money. And obviously that assumes that they are looking at higher education opportunities, which may not apply to every student who would like to serve as the student member on the board. But I'm a little worried about whether people would run for the right reasons. And I wonder whether you thought about scholarship rather than salary. I'd love to hear from Senator Carter or any of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Carter, you can do it, or you can assign one of your panelists.
If only one person gets to speak, I'll let one of the others speak and answer offline.
Thanks, Senator.
It basically creates a task force to come up with the best scenario for how this compensation would work.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, I'm sorry, I was in another committee, so I think I must have missed that. Thank you, Senator Carter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We do have more people to testify. Seeing no questions for these four, let's move on to Kenya Campbell, followed Lydell Hills, followed by Raleek Hayes, followed by Linda Chinia. Are you with us, Kenya Campbell?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and members of the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. I'm Kenya Campbell. I am a public school educator with 20 plus years of experience with working in Baltimore City Public Schools. I am also the president of AFT, American Federation of Teachers Maryland, which represents state, county, and city workers, including the Baltimore Teachers Union. AFT Maryland strongly supports and asks for a favorable report for SB 157. The bill that would grant city school students more of a say in their education and increase their input on how their school system is governed. It will also form a commission to study the feasibility of compensating members of the city school board. The committee has our written testimony, so let me just offer a few highlights. We believe the most successful public school systems, like all democratic institutions, are those that actively invite stakeholders to have a voice in decision-making. This bill strives to achieve these goals in a few ways. First, it increases the number of students on the school board from 1 to 2, making it more likely that diverse voices have a say on school board matters. Second, it allows student members to vote on budgets, school closings, reopenings, and local school boundaries, as well as to participate in executive sessions that are supposedly not subject to open meeting laws. Finally, it increases the likelihood of real, meaningful participation in school governance by the broader Baltimore City community by forming a work group to study the potential to compensate school board members for their work on the board. Currently, Baltimore City is only one of 2 districts in the state that do not compensate school board members for their work. The result is that far too many residents who may be good candidates for the school board just do not have the time or the resources to commit to the work that needs to be done to effectively govern our city's school system. For these reasons, AFT Maryland calls for a favorable report to SB 157. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Let's go to Liddell Hills, if you're with us.
I don't think Ms. Hills is present, Senator Pinsky.
Okay, then let's go to Raleigh Hayes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I send apologies for Mr. Hill. He had a conflict. I come to you as the Deputy Director of Organizing Black and a lifelong Baltimore City resident. I live in the 40th District. Thank you again, Chairman Pinsky and Vice Chair Kagan for this opportunity and the members of the committee. I have been an advocate and a person involved in government and city advocacy since I was a high school student, as Senator Washington and Senator Carter can definitely attest to. I've learned how to manage budgets, how to build organizations, and many critical skills that still serve me to this day, which is how I'm able to sit here as a deputy director of my own organization with our own staff. And so I think it's really critical that we support adding additional student members and giving them full voting rights, because it is a critical pathway to leadership. It is a critical way to teach skills that you might not get a chance to, particularly with those who can help mentor you around you, and have a compatriot who you can confide in. I know a lot of things that I did as a young person, as a member of the Baltimore Algebra Project, was made easier because there were a lot of us, right? And so that factor just cannot be denied. I'll cut my testimony short because I know you guys have the written version, and I just thank you for your time, and I hope you support the bill SB 157.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Thank you very much. And finally, let's go to Linda Chania.
Thank you, Chairman Pinsky and Vice Chair Kagan and members of the committee. I also want to acknowledge Senator Mary Washington, who represents Baltimore City and has really been a supporter of city schools. I'm Linda Chinya. I am the current past chair of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. I also served in the city for over almost 40 years as an educator within the system, from teacher to administrator. The legislation before you is very important to the school board, and we want to make sure that we, along with everyone else, provide for the student members an invaluable learning experience. The student member, even with the current restrictions in the law, serves on the board's policy committee and votes on all policies that are before the school board. The policy committee is one of the most important committees of the board, as it provides the overall direction for the school system and also guidance to the CEO for daily management. We ask that before any changes are made to the student member, from voting rights to how the student is elected, that the committee allow the board to continue to work with the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, known as ASCBC. This is the entity that selects the student member to the board. We would like to continue to build a stronger and more robust interest in serving in student government and on the school board. The current process is not completely flawed. Currently, ASCBC's executive committee selects the student member to the board, and all students who are members of an SGA can become a member of ASCBC. But unfortunately, because of what we've experienced due to the pandemic, some of the interest of students has waned. And in fact, the city had almost 40 SGAs that were really working before the pandemic, and currently we have only 28. The board knows that working with our students and building a plan for more involvement in the process would allow for a broader representation of the student body in order to participate in both student government, but also to bring more interested students to serve on the board. The board also thinks that once we've done this plan, really developed this plan, that it will attract more students. As for the compensation study, the board asked me to make certain that you know that this has not come from the school board to General Assembly to seek compensation. However, this year, the city school board will become a hybrid board. With the addition of 2 elected school board members, the board does agree that a study should be conducted to look at the compensation for all members.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think we understand you're not here for the board to fatten your pockets. We understand it's a policy question. And as has been said, 22 other boards do compensate their members. So I think we get that clearly. Are there questions for these last 3 or 4 speakers? Seeing none, I do have one question. Ms. Campbell, how long since you took over as president? How long have you been in office?
At this point, 6 months.
Well, congratulations and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Carter, for joining us and bringing your great witnesses. Thank all our witnesses for joining us. That concludes the hearing on this bill. Thank you. Now we're going to move to 162. That's Senator Hester, our own Senator Hester. And this is Cyber Safety Guide and Training Course Development, Implementation, and Reporting. We will hear from Senator Hester, followed by Laura Nelson, and Senator Bobby Zirkin, and Anpum Sashi. So with that, Senator Hester, please take over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for consideration of Senate Bill 162, which is actually a reintroduction of a bill you heard last year, which directs the State Department of Education to work with the Department of Health to develop a cyber safety guide and training course. For context, you may recall that prior to serving on this committee, in 2019, I served on judicial proceedings. And that was the year that we passed Grace's Law, championed by Senator Zirkin. It increased the criminal penalty for perpetrators who convinced minors to commit suicide. Unfortunately, this is the reality that we live in today. However, at that time, I felt that we also needed to do more to teach our children how to protect themselves online. In 2019, the Joint Committee on Cybersecurity, IT, and Biotechnology heard testimony from Dr. Jacob Schwartz from Georgetown University and Dr. Stephen Zinn from the University of Maryland School of Medicine. And they noted that since 2010, the suicide rate among teen boys has doubled and among teen girls had tripled. At the same time, we all have had more access to smartphones and social media, which has only increased during COVID. And the two pointed out in 2019 that while correlation does not always mean causation, recent research has shown the complex links between mental health and social media usage. So how would Senate Bill 162 help? It would increase the safety of our students by providing local boards of ed access to a cyber safety guide and training course that would be distributed to each Board of Education for their own use, but it does not mandate the course. The course would include information and best practices promoting responsible internet and social media use through the prevention and management of cybersecurity, cyberbullying, sexting, hate speech and graphic content, dissemination of false information, and the links between social media and technology use and mental and behavioral health issues. In your testimony, you will find letters of support from the Attorney General, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, Mental Health Association of Maryland, the Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Dr. Anupam Joshi from the UMBC Center of Cybersecurity, and Laura Nelson from the National Cryptological Foundation. You will also see that there's a letter of information from MSDE in the bill file that is generally supportive but has two main questions. My office is currently working with MSDE on technical amendments to resolve those questions, and I hope to have their full support soon. I believe this work is incredibly important. It will be of great use to parents, teachers, and students attempting to balance the demands of an increasing digital world with their own mental and behavioral well-being. With your permission, I'd like to turn it over to my panel and respectfully request a favorable report of Senate Bill 162.
That's great. Ms. Nelson, I think you're first on the list.
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Nelson, and I'm offering my full support for Senate Bill 162. I'm a retired senior executive from the National Security Agency and the president and CEO of the National Cryptologic Foundation, or NCF. Over the past 3 years, our foundation has built a robust education program focused on public understanding of cybersecurity and promoting cyber professions as a fulfilling career choice with K-12 students. My colleague Mark Lepker will share more about our cyber education program. In Maryland and across the country, residents, young and old, are unaware and uninformed about how their data is being used, collected, or shared in our digital world. K-12 students are also vulnerable to cyberbullying and other dangerous online behavior. We need to help our children and our teens understand the real cyber threat, and we need to provide educators with the resources, tools, and professional development to teach cybersecurity. Maryland teachers, administrators, and counselors agree. In collaboration with the Maryland State Department of Education, the Maryland Center for Computing Education, the University of Maryland Global Campus, and the National Security Agency, we conducted a survey to solicit inputs from all Maryland school districts to advance Maryland cybersecurity education, to gauge how well the field is understood and the challenges in developing associated high school courses and programs. During the spring semester of last year, an online survey was created and made available to the 24 Maryland district administrators for subsequent dissemination. The intended audience were teachers, counselors, administrators within each of the school systems. First and foremost, teachers and administrators both responded that there is a need for awareness building, what cyber is, as well as the breadth of opportunities. Teachers and counselors listed various reasons for low student interest in cyber topics, such as lack of knowledge about the topic, lack of exposure to the no computer science lab or courses, or access to no computers or laptops at all. The most resounding and consistent response from all was a need for additional funding. Professional development and cyber training for teachers in ITM and in STEM cybersecurity curriculum were listed as needed resources for their schools. One teacher commented, "I'm not sure what we should be doing at the elementary level, but I do think we should start teaching the basics before students enter middle school." Administrators commented that a needed resource was more staff whose dedicated purpose is to focus on STEM and tech alone. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Vice Chairman, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity for the foundation to submit testimony and speak to the committee today.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Let's go to Senator Bobby Zirkin. Welcome back to Annapolis, however virtual it is.
Thank you, and good to see all of you guys. It's great to be back with you, and I wanted to thank Senator Hester for inviting me to come speak about this bill. I'm just here talking as a lawyer, as a person, and as the lead sponsor of what I hope you guys are all proud of, a vote that you took. For me, in 21 years, maybe the most important bill that I ever pursued was Grace's Law 2.0, which updated what was a completely out of date cyberbullying, cyber stalking law related to children. If you recall, just very quickly, Grace was that little girl from Howard County who was just savaged online until her parents tried everything reasonable to try and had nothing that could help them. And to make a long story short, they came home one day and she had hung herself on their banister, had committed suicide. Maryland still has the strongest kind of reactive cyberbullying law in the country. What Senator Hester is trying to do is to be proactive with this, which is critically important. I'm just going to give you one. I think this bill is really important. I wish we had done it and thought more about what the education piece of this when we did Grace's Law, because we would have been able to get that passed as well. At the end of the day, these kids really don't know what they're what their rights are and how to pursue these things, even still, even though we have these laws. And I'll just give you one example. In my law practice just a few months ago, and I can tell you, like, I get calls about this all the time from parents trying to figure out what to do in varying situations. There was one that was incredibly shocking. Just literally, I think it was like a month and a half ago, somebody called my office and their child, who was 13, had been on Zoom with a bunch of boys. She, I think on her Instagram account, had a picture of herself in a bathing suit or something, and the boys had taken it, doctored it up, and made it look like she was naked. And they threatened her that they were going to release this onto Instagram and Snapchat or whatever these kids are using if she didn't take her clothes off on a Zoom with them. And so they were, sextorting this 13-year-old kid. And she thankfully refused to do so. And then the punishment started, and the cyberbullying started. And they didn't know what to do about it. And there are things you can do. We passed a law back a few years ago that allows them all kinds of things. It's not just about if a kid tells you to, if people are trying to get a kid to commit suicide, you can go before a judge and get a peace order. There are things you can do short of criminalizing, behavior against these children. There are ways to get this to stop, and the families just don't know. I spoke with I took it on as a pro bono thing and talked to the principal. The principal didn't realize that we had laws that could do this stuff. Like, they just didn't know. And I can tell you just one other story was, my daughter yesterday was talking about some kid and she used the word nudes. And I'm like, what does that mean? I mean, I kind of figured what it meant. And apparently, like, these kids like sending around naked pictures of themselves and, which is, and I said to my daughter, I'm like, you realize, like, anybody who even possesses that, that's possession of child pornography. Like, that is a crime. And, all of the safety issues that go with doing stupid things like that, they just don't get it. As much as we pass laws to try to protect them after the fact, I really think Katie's bill, is just good proactive measure. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to come back and see all you guys.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Joshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Anupam Joshi. I am the Oros Family Professor and Chair of Computer Science, Electrical Engineering at UMBC, and also the Director of UMBC's Cybersecurity Center. It is my distinct honor and privilege to offer support for Senate Bill 162. I would caution that I am representing myself here and not UMBC. And my opinion is informed not just by my expertise in this area, but frankly, as a parent. So I think it's fairly uncontroversial to say that students need help navigating cyberspace in a safe manner, just like they do in the physical world. For the physical world, however, we have a millennia of experience. Schools and parents teach children to be wary of strangers, to wash their hands for 20 seconds with soap and water, to cover their sneezes, all kinds of appropriate behavior in the physical world. And yet, these are all everyday small actions that increase the safety and keep children from harm. Cyberspace is not just new, but rapidly evolving. This limits the ability of educators and parents to teach children in an age-appropriate way the defensive driving approach to their online activities. So the state creating education materials and training that parents and educators can use, I think, is very important. And this bill is a right step. Many dangers of cyberspace are well known and extensively discussed. You've heard prior testimony, so I'm not going to spend time repeating that. However, there are dangers that are new and unique to cyberspace. So it creates a private space where the children are interacting with the world and its dangers. And to all but the most technologically savvy parents and educators, controlling or limiting these interactions is extremely hard. There have been several recent cases, and you heard testimony from Senator Zirkin, where children have been lured into sharing suggestive pictures and then blackmailed for worse. Children's worldview is influenced by the kind of information, often misleading and false information, that they see on social media. And very recently, the US Senate held hearings where it's been shown that social media is causing mental health issue and suicide ideation amongst teenagers, especially girls. it's also very hard for children to think about the future. Something that looks funny and cool when I'm a 10-year-old and I post a picture of that on Snapchat. Well, 20 years later, I may not look back so kindly upon that. And engaging young children to think about that kind of future prospect is very hard. I have teenagers, and I know how hard it is to get them to think about things that'll happen in their 20s and 30s. That's for old people, they say. So I think it's critical that we offer age-appropriate cyber hygiene education early on, and not just to children, but to parents and educators who are mentoring them. And just like we do for the physical world, having some standard from the state that offers guidance optionally to parents and educators, I think is very important. And this bill is a step in that direction. I urge a positive review and support.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. Are there questions for the sponsor or any of these three people testifying? Senator Simon Ayer.
Thank you. Thank you for this legislation. Just a couple quick questions. I was reading through the bill. So I guess the first question is, this is not mandated on the locals. They can do it or they don't have to do it, correct? Okay. And then the other question is, if they do implement it, the quick reading of the bill seemed like it was self-guided. It's not like the teachers are doing this. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Senator Simon Ayer. We've tried to leave it as open as possible, wanting to defer to the local counties, but providing them with the resources to do it well. However, I am just delighted that our new state superintendent is interested in this. And I mean, I've introduced this bill. This is the third year that I've introduced this bill. So on some of the technical questions, about how the course would actually work and whether it's self-guided or whatever, I'm planning to work very closely with MSDE in the next week to 10 days to make sure that the amendments that they request actually move this forward, we take very seriously. So we can bring that question to our conversation with them as well. Good question.
Okay, but currently it's a self-guided as it's written today.
I think it was up for the MSDE to develop. I mean, I think it could be on a number of different ways. It could be,
No. I understand that MSDE develops it, but I believe it says at the local it's self-guided. And so we can talk about that offline. The other thing is, it says they can give credit for this. So, I mean, there's certain credits that you have to graduate. Would this replace something, or would this be additional credits on top of the minimum standard?
When I developed it, originally in 2019, I was thinking that it could actually be extra credit in a class, not like, and in other states it's been done as part of a health class, but it could also be part of a cyber, and some other media or IT class. So once again, we'll defer to the new superintendent and what they actually think would work best going forward.
Okay, and then the last question, I was reading some of the opposition. They say there's material out there already and they're implementing that. I was looking at the fiscal note. It was over $1 million for the State Department to do it, Education Department to do this. Why did you decide to have them do it at such a high cost when there's material already available?
If you read the fiscal note, Senator Simon Ayer, DLS mentions that there are materials currently available that could be used, for free. I believe the National Cryptological Foundation also has a program that they're rolling out at a much lower cost, but does have some funding available. It really depends on, some of our discussions this week with MSD included having a curated list of what is available and potentially having a small grant program. But there are free materials that MSDE could curate and share, but it still requires them to be taught, in the school. And for school systems to step up and say, hey, we value our children's safety online, and we're going to make this an important priority in some of our classes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just start by saying, Senator Hester, thank you for your ongoing leadership and commitment to cybersecurity, cyberbullying, and so many of these vitally important issues. Your expertise in this, I think, helps guide and inspire us all. So thank you for that. Senator Zirkin, I don't know if he's already gone, but it was nice. There he is. He's right here. Nice that you dressed up for us.
I have a basketball game.
I know that you're going to coach basketball. We get to see you, whatever you're wearing here. I just had a question and a comment. Senator Hester, if you could just explain how the bill has morphed, because it looks like this year's is the same as last year's, but it has changed over the years. If you can just address that. And then I just want to say that years ago, Ms. Nelson, I had an amazing visit to the National Cryptological Museum and Mr. Lupker. I think it's the coolest place. And if any of you have not been there, I encourage you to consider taking a field trip, take your kids or whatever. And I don't know if there have been upgrades or changes in the last 10 or 12 years. I suspect there have, but very cool place, and really commend you for your work. So Senator Hester, anything you might enlighten us about?
So the first year that we introduced it, it was simply a guidebook without any course, available, even though it was optional. The second year we added the course. The bill bill in front of you is identical to the bill as it was last year. The changes that we've talked about today are forthcoming, given the communication I've had with stakeholders around the topic. And so you can expect to see an amendments which will change the bill in certain different ways. But I think most people are online with the policy intent of the bill. It's just what's the most practical way, the most cost-effective way to have the biggest impact on the safety of our kids across the state.
Yes, and I think having a delayed effective date is smart, so that MSDE, the Maryland State Department of Education, and others can really take their time and do something thoughtfully and not just throw it together. So good job on that too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let's go to the last two speakers on this bill. That would be Mark Loker and then John Willems.
Good afternoon. I'm here to offer support for SB 162. My name is Mark Lupker, and I am the Director of Education at the National Cryptologic Foundation. You heard from our President and CEO, Laura Nelson, that over the past 3 years, we built a robust education program focused on K-12 cybersecurity awareness, education, and promoting cyber professions. Students are really faced with increased cyberbullying, as we've heard, inappropriate content, hate speech, and false information. Arming students with the knowledge of these threats, and more importantly, the tools to protect themselves and their data, is of paramount importance. Maryland schools are a perfect place to build this awareness and promote interest in cyber topics and professions. Now, a basic course providing an introduction to cybersecurity, cyber safety, and data care is critical for elementary and middle school students. Now, for high school students, a deeper understanding may be required. This understanding can be broken down into the 8 big ideas of our high school cybersecurity curriculum guidelines. Among them are ethics, establishing trust, data security, system security, adversarial thinking, and risk. Providing high school cybersecurity education and teacher training is a reality today. With our partner Teach Cyber, 28 teachers from Maryland are registered with our program. Last semester, 15 Maryland teachers received professional development, and 19 Maryland teachers applied for the National Cybersecurity Teaching Academy based on the guidelines. Together, we are planning a joint workshop this summer with the Maryland Center of Computing Education to adapt the guidelines and Teach Cyber courseware into a 2-course sequence to create a cybersecurity pathway for Maryland. The time is now. The tools are available. A cyber safety guide and training course can be a reality for all Maryland schools, thereby protecting our children from the threats and dangers inherent with the cyber tools they use every day. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Vice Chairman, and committee members, thank you for this opportunity for the foundation to submit testimony and speak to the committee today.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you. Mr. Willems.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. I want to thank Senator Hester for introducing this legislation. And MABE has adopted a different position, if you will, on this legislation in the past, based on extensive discussions with Senator Hester on a number of cybersecurity related issues, and her assurance earlier in her testimony today that the intent is to provide this as an extensive set of tools in the toolbox for the voluntary implementation by local school systems. MABE testimony articulates an amendment intended to clarify that. We are keenly interested in and very excited about MSDE's support and engagement in this bill, and I would say the legislative process on the whole. And under Superintendent Chaudhry's leadership, that is an exciting and very positive development, and their support, along with that of other state agencies, will be very essential to the success of this program. But we very much see the value in all of the programs developed, but do highlight in the testimony that it is a lot. It is essentially an instructional program for students and a professional development program for staff, and a community public awareness program, if you will, for parents. So there's a lot packed in here, and we want to ensure there's the appropriate amount of local discretion in implementing any of these tools within our local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willems. Mr. Willems is the last person testifying. I think there's a lot of interest in doing something in this area. It's been a problem. We know that. I would urge committee members to look the bill over and suggest amendments, either when we have a workup session or directly to Senator Fry Hester. I think there are ways we can make this tighter and accommodating to all the parties and still make some progress in dealing with this very major problem. So with that, thank you, Senator Fry Hester, for introducing the bill and all the people testifying. And that concludes that hearing. And we move to the last bill, which is Senate Bill 204 by request. This is State Libraries, Maryland State Library Board membership. And I believe we have Irene Padilla and Donna Liberto to testify on this. Welcome, please.
Well, good afternoon, Chairperson Pinsky and members of the committee. I'm Irene Padilla, Maryland State Librarian, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland State Library Board to support SB 204. You are aware the Maryland State Library Board consists of 12 members. 7 members are appointed by the governor. And of these 7 appointees, 5 are selected from the public at large. 1 is a professional librarian, and 1 is a Maryland Public Library trustee. The remaining 5 members serve ex officio, representing different areas of Maryland's library community. These include the Secretary of Higher Education, the President of the Board of Trustees of Enoch Pratt Free Library, the President of the Maryland Library Association, the Dean of the University of Maryland College of Library and Information Services, and the President of the Maryland Association of School Librarians. This bill addresses these ex officio members, specifically proposing that the President of the Congress of Academic Library Directors replace the Secretary of Education. The Maryland Higher Education Commission no longer has jurisdiction over academic libraries. The Congress of Academic Library Directors, which plays an important role in Maryland's library leadership, has been selected to replace MHAC in order to provide representation for libraries of higher education in Maryland. It is essential that we have leadership at the table when we're talking about all types of libraries in Maryland. And the Maryland State Library Board would appreciate your support for this legislation and your favorable vote. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Padilla? She is the only witness. This was by request. I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you for making the request and appearing today, Ms. Padilla. Thank you. That concludes the hearings for today. Committee members, it's early end, work on your bills, do redrafts, rewrites, reviews, so we can make those bills great and get them submitted. Thank you for your cooperation, attendance, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.